Novel, Chapter 607, Hardships Part 1. It's a success. The old skinwalker armor would have been pierced and its barrier wasn't strong enough to protect my exposed limbs from the dagger's enchanted edge. If only both the armor and hammer weren't just a prototype. Lith moaned. He had used cyan mana crystals to make both hammers instead of blue ones, which meant that not only was the skinwalker ugly to look at, but it also wasn't as powerful as it could have been. Yeah, right, quit moaning and rejoice, or at least take a break before working on blood forging another skinwalker. There's a reason they are called experiments. We don't know if the blue crystal hammer will add new complications. Solus said. Also, I refuse to keep using well-made hammers as their design. Lith checked at his pocket watch. They still had a lot of time before going back to Bellius. He took a quick shower and ate a ham sandwich to recover the lost strength. After half an hour, he was almost back to his peak condition, but used invigoration nonetheless. It's the first time I use Bloomforge, so everything must be perfect. I can't predict what will happen, but at least by being both mentally and physically at the top of my game, I can rule out tiredness as possible source of mistakes. Lith said. The initial phase of the experiment was identical to Necroforge. Bonding the chainmail to the mana crystal was easy, whereas what followed quickly turned into a nightmare. Lith had to refine the ingredients one by one, creating from each one a small pseudo-core. Condensing so much energy in such a small form required a lot of his focus, but he easily succeeded. The first real problem arose when merging the first two pseudo-cores. The mana pathways weren't strong enough to contain them both, so Lith had to expand the pathways while keeping the cores fused and fighting against the rejection effect. With each core he added, the situation became more complicated. He had to strengthen the mana pathways, fix the deformities that appeared when the armor and the cores collided plus those which occurred during the pseudo-cores merging process. To merge all 4 cores, it took him over an hour and much more slime goop than he had predicted since he had to consume some for each new pseudo-core. Then, he was forced to stop, focusing only on stabilizing the mana pathways while the resonance between the orichalcum and the cores made the latter grow. Damn it, if I miss their rhythm by a beat everything will go down the gutter. To make things worse, I also have to be careful that the cores don't get deformed beyond recognition. Bloom forging a skinwalker is a mammoth task straight from the beginning. Lith thought. Since they had no need for the hammer yet, Solus was free to help him to give the cores the right shape. Then, the forge mastering turned from a nightmare into a Lovecraft novel. Despair, helplessness, and madness seemed its only possible ending. Growing and fixing 4 pseudo-cores at once, all the while adapting the mana pathways made Lith almost puke blood. Unlike what had happened when he crafted the Bloom hammer, a small increase in the pseudo-core's size meant a 4-fold increase in the pressure they exerted on the mana pathways. The process was even slower than Lith had predicted, taking a further toll on his mind and mana. On top of that, every time the merged cores grew bigger, the Thunderbird's plume and the orichalcum would interact again. Soon Lith was forced to stop the forge mastering, making it a failure and a success at the same time. A success because the Bloom skinwalker was complete. A failure because Lith had been forced to halt the process before the pseudo-core could become as big as the one of the Necro skinwalker. What time is it? Lith asked. Almost late. How do you feel? Terrible. I never used invigoration so many times in a row. It has almost no effect anymore, Lith said. I need some rest as well. Do you mind if I stay in Lucia? The mana geyser will help me recover quickly and I don't want to be your 5th wheel again. Solus asked. Are you sure? You know that I'm not planning for any lovey-dovey stuff, right? Even if I wanted to, I'm too tired. Lith had got used to being separated from Solus, but he still hated the void that her absence left inside of his soul. Right, just like yesterday and the day before. Solus's voice oozed sarcasm. I'm a healthy young man in a healthy relationship and it's been weeks since I spent a bit of time with Camila. How could I turn her down? You couldn't and you shouldn't, but that doesn't make it any easier on the 5th wheel. Me, I'll see if I get the girls to come visiting me, otherwise I'd rather spend some alone time working on Bloom Forge. We have one last chainmail suit. If we fail again, it means that our first estimate is correct and that at our level Bloom Forge isn't suitable for crafting so many pseudo-cores at once. Lith reluctantly accepted her decision. Solus was her own person and just like him, she deserved her own space. When Camila arrived home, Lith had just finished showering. He looked like someone who had just ended a double shift in a mine. His breath was short and his shoulders slouching from the fatigue. Hello, handsome. How was your day? Camila pretended not to notice, throwing her arms around his neck. She brimmed with joy. Safe but tiring. Are you ready to get out for dinner? Won't you prefer to stay at home for some cuddles? You seem a bit tired, she said. That's a nice way of saying that I look like crap, and yes, I would rather stay at home, but I can't afford to lose the reservation. I'll bring you to a family restaurant, so there's no need for fancy clothes. Camila wore a light blue shirt over a knee-length black pencil skirt. Her long black hair was down. That together with her black eyeliner and light red lipstick emphasized her pale skin. Aren't those the same clothes you wore during our first date? It's not our anniversary, yet, Lith asked. I know, but now I consider them my lucky clothes, and I'm feeling pretty lucky recently, she said before giving him a passionate kiss. She was flattered that Lith remembered both the clothes and the date they had met. Camila was surprised when he brought her to Bellis's warp gate. Lith wasn't the type to get too far for a meal. Her surprise became even bigger when the gate led them to a private office in what looked like an ancient castle. Headmaster Marth, this is Camila, my girlfriend. Camilla, this is Headmaster Marth, a man that I have the honor to call a friend. Duke Marth had more gray hair than the last time Lith had seen him and seemed even more tired than Lith was. Nice to meet you, Miss Camilla. Follow my advice and never get too high in life, or the paperwork will burn your wings and bury you alive. A wave of his hand opened a warp steps that Lith forced her to cross before she could even understand where they were. Chapter 608, Hardships Part 2. Surprise, he said to both Camilla and Zinnia. Zinnia had been accommodated in a single room as big as a small apartment. The furniture was simple but tasteful, giving her all that she needed to make herself at home and even have guests. There were big windows from which entered plenty of sunlight and lots of different flowers decorated the room. Zin, between the tonics, Vaster's treatments, and the safe environment, Camilla almost couldn't recognize her sister. Her knees buckled, forcing Lith to sweep her off her feet to prevent her from falling. Cammy, how did you get here? Visiting hours are over. Her knees buckled too, but she was in bed, so no one noticed. Hey, I may not work here anymore, but I still got friends. Visiting hours is whenever you want for you too, Lith said, bringing Camilla near the bed before putting her down on a chair. The two sisters started chatting and crying out of joy while Lith used his old professor ring to order dinner for the three of them. He was feeling better by the minute. His blue core was thriving by being so near to the abundant mana source that the academy was. The two women talked a lot, giving Lith a taste of an evening in Solas's shoes, but to him it didn't feel so bad. He was satisfied with seeing Camilla being so happy. She never stopped smiling, like it hadn't happened ever since her first visit at the Sarda household. If Solas feels like this the whole time, she's a saint. Lith thought. He was already getting bored not having any part in the conversation. Can I show her your gift now? Zinnia asked, finally remembering about Lith. Yes, of course. Camilla remained flabbergasted seeing the communication amulet. Thanks, but we cannot accept it. It's too expensive, she said. I knew you would say that, and that's why I had her imprint it already, Lith laughed. You can only suck it up and accept that your sister can now call you whenever she wants and vice versa. Camilla was lost for words, incapable of expressing the feelings that were taking her by storm. Thanks, was all she managed to say. She spent the rest of the evening chatting with Zinnia, reminiscing together the happy moments of their shared past and planning the future ones, once the procedure was over. Lith half listened and half slept, making the two women giggle when his snoring reached new heights. Lith is indeed a bit scary, but he's a keeper. Don't let him get away, Zinnia said. I know, but how can I possibly repay him for all of this? We're so different that sometimes it feels like our relationship is one way only, and I'm always on the receiving end. What do I have to offer to him? Your love and trust. Those are two rare commodities, especially for someone who's coveted for their power. Just be honest with him and don't overthink. You are a wonderful person and he knows it. Zinnia took Camilla's hands between hers. Has he ever asked you for something? No, Camilla replied. Then it's you he's interested in, not in what you have. As long as you feel the same, then you've nothing to worry about. Later, when they were returning home, Camilla pondered all the way back on Zinnia's words, even asking Lith for a walk to have more time to think. With winter close to its end, there was no snow covering Bellius. The chilly air of the night and the late hour made the city silent. Very few people were still walking around. Camilla looked in the big black buildings that comprised every single city block, thinking for the first time in years if that was the place that she wanted to call home for the rest of her life. Her mind started to wander, reminiscing the party at the Erna's house. It was so big and flashy that it almost scared her. Then, Lith's house in Lucia came to her mind, with the entire family around the fire, with the kids playing together or watching a movie with the rest of the family. That image warmed her heart. When they arrived at her apartment, Camilla felt the need to let Lith know how important he was for her and how deep her affection was. Just like Solas had predicted, tired or not, Lith was more than happy to spend the third night in a row doing anything but sleeping. Earlier that night, inside Solas's tower. Thanks to the tower warp coupled with the warping mirror on the first floor, which greatly enhanced the range of her warp steps, it didn't take Solas much time to pick up her friends. I still can't believe how easily we just crossed hundreds of kilometers at once. Lith is really lucky to have you, Tista said. She had been moving around the Distar Marquisate, collecting all the information she needed for her travels once spring finally arrived. Yeah, it makes our sleepovers so easy to arrange. To what do we owe the pleasure this time? Nika asked. Kala's daughter was no normal girl, but a vampire, so she could only move after sunset. Nika looked like a young woman in her mid-20s, around 1.7 meters, 5 feet 7 inches, tall with raven black hair and emerald green eyes, both emphasized by her rosy skin. A vampire was pale only when unable to properly feed, and that wasn't her case. She wasn't a stunning beauty, but undeath gave her smooth, delicate features and kept her body toned without a shred of body fat. Every one of her movements was graceful and sensual, even when she wasn't attempting to flirt. I need help, Solas said. She was wearing a work shirt and pants. Leather gloves covered her hands, leaving the natural glow of her humanoid form radiate only from her head. Do you need another pep talk or advice about Lil Bro? Tista asked. Neither. I mean help with a forge mastering experiment. Solas told her about the last memory she had recovered and what had triggered it. This is huge, sister. Nika was adamant, considering Solas a fellow vampire due to her bond with Lith's life force. Why you didn't tell your spouse? 1 secret is okay, but 2. The more secrets you keep, the more you'll grow apart. For the last time, he isn't my spouse. Lith isn't even my boyfriend. He's with Camila now. Sometimes Nika's single-minded approach on life exasperated Solus. You share one body, one mind, and one life. If that's not a spouse, what is it? Nika said, always striking the iron no matter if it was hot or not. I'm with Nika, for once. Tista stepped in before the two could start bickering. What if something happens and you two fuse again? If Lith discovers how many things you've kept from him, it will hurt him. I could understand if this was just about not wanting to mess with his relationship, but now it has become about your life. Maybe he could help you recover your memories. Like you always say, just give him a chance, she said.